you know? All right.
Okay.
So awesome. Thank you, everybody. I have an incredible, I would say, friend in person that I met back in 2023 at the Psychedelic conference. And so this is Johnny Johnson of the Navajo, and I'll let him do a little bit more of an intro. So Johnny, if you could just share your name and anything that you think that the audience would like to hear, so they know who you are.
Yeah, my name is Johnny Johnson. I'm a member of the Navajo or Diné Nation, and I'm 63 years old.
Man, you look
And
not a day over 30, Johnny.
yeah, and I have four children. I also have six grandchildren now. So
Wow.
I've been a what they call a roadman, Native American church roadman. But what that really is, in my opinion, is a life coach. I've been doing this since 1990, so going on 35 years. Doing this, and I do beauty way teach some beauty, what I call beauty way teaching and protection way teaching, and under the umbrella of classical education. And classical education is about moral education, ethical literacy, and liberal arts in those areas. So it sort of goes along the line of having some type of epiphany or enlightenment experience as far as literature is concerned through Western education. So that's who I am, briefly.
I love that, Johnny. I think that's like where we really connect because we're both like pursuers of education of like our entire world in a multicultural and polycultural way. So like when I
Yeah,
first met you and you were talking about classic literature and philosophy and sociology, I was like, dude, you know how many books that I've read and how many things that I've written? And I think like, yeah, that's why I really am so excited for you to like share more with everybody. And so that leads me to like the next question. Particularly, I think like us talking about peyote and like how important it is to your people and your nation and what the what the situations have been when it has come to what I call colonial psychedelia or the mainstream psychedelia and what
hmm
they're trying to do with peyote, particularly through, the conservations and land grabs and stuff like that. So I think like starting off, if you wouldn't mind just sharing like how significant peyote is to your culture and to your people.
I think it's a very important thing. It's very important in certain people's lives. Not everybody agrees with the psychedelic experience when they use peyote. And I think if people want to have it their way, people will not really use peyote. But if
Mm,
they have some type of spiritual selflessness, understanding, meaning that they believe in something up higher than themselves, and then they will go along to experience the effects, the mental effects of the peyote, and how they see it like that. And it's really about teachings, direct and indirect communication, and having experience, having an understanding between truth and opinion. And opinion is that you can learn from other people in a good way. And then the truth is having a psychedelic experience and seeing for yourself something that's significant, that's related to spirituality. And that would be considered a person's truth.
mm,
If I had a psychedelic experience and I saw something in my vision, that would be my truth. So that goes along the lines of humanity.
mm,
Humanity is to become more human, to be a gentleman, and but for a lady, it would be something that's ladylike, meaning uh, to be sincere and to be a gentle person, to be tamed. That's
mm.
supposed to be a lifetime experience. That's how I think it's important. Otherwise, as Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living.
Mm.
Meaning, don't cultivate your perspective, a person can waste their entire life. It's just a wasted life,
Mm,
period. You know,
period.
so that's
And
it.
I totally, I'm right there with you on that. And that's something that like has been critical in my work of critiquing and in a way calling in colonial psychedelia is that there's not like this praxis of decolonization and anti-oppression. And then we seeing what is happening is that this ideology that psychedelics makes good people, but then we see people like Musk and the billionaire Nazi, what I call the Nazi billionaire class, literally trying to enforce fascism and what they call network states upon humanity and doing it in not good ways where millions of people are dying, the environment's being impacted by it. And these people are on psychedelics and on drugs all the time. Which leads me to like the next question, because actually something that was really interesting when I met you, Johnny, is that we were walking around the conference and you were like, "What is psychedelic?" And now I hear you now, like you're integrated it into your language sharing here, and so I'd love to like for you to go into that, like when you first heard the word psychedelic at the conference in 2023, and like how you evolved that, and like how would the Navajo in particular like do they wouldn't call it psychedelic, but what would how do you all describe the journey that you would go on Peyote? Um,
Oh, well, I attended a Native American Church of North America conference here in Gallup about 2 weeks prior to my trip to Denver. And none of the leaders talked about the psychedelic movement. I didn't know it was an international movement. It's a worldwide movement. The psychedelic industry is like a billion-dollar industry, big time. I didn't know that.
11.1 billion is predicted for it to become big pharma 2.0.
Yeah. I didn't know that the peyote was kind of tucked away in there in the name of mescaline. So
Mm-hmm.
they don't use the word peyote, they use the word mescaline. And peyote has like 80% mescaline in there, where other cactus that are in the Southwest, they only have like 20 to 30%. So peyote carries a lot of that mescaline in there. And when I went to Denver, it kind of gave me what they call a rude awakening. And I kind of like, wow, this is big time, big business, like Walmart, Home Depot, and Target all put together, Burger
Mm-hmm.
King, McDonald's, and man, it's a big thing. And 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 are you there?
Yes, yes, I'm here.
Uh, so what happened was, I guess I was mispronouncing the word. Uh, I thought it was psychedelics, but it was actually psychedelics. The word psychedelics. I thought it was psychedelics. So it took me a while to kind of start using the word psychedelics, meaning that it has a mental effect on here, and I began to more and more or less understand. So when I use this peyote sacrament in the ceremony, I began to learn that when that peyote, that if you take a lot of peyote, more and more peyote, it has a more and more of a psychedelic effect on you.
Mm.
So that's coming from this psychedelic industry. But here at home, they kind of keep it simple to say how the medicine works on you, how it works on me. That's just a general layman's term about the psychedelic effect. So I can go to a ceremony and say, wow, I had a good psychedelic experience last night. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But if people
just the
didn't go,
medicine working.
yeah, the medicine working on you. So that's kind of like maybe the answer. Hopefully you get my answer right there.
No, that's a phenomenal answer. And like for me, what it signals to me is that while the mainstream colonial psychedelia world says like, oh, we are in touch with indigenous stewards and the indigenous people and da 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 da. To me, it shows that's performative because, as a Navajo roadman and who, I'm sure that peyote and this medicine was in your life from a young age because it's like the way that you all talk about it's just the way of life. It's just medicine. But then we have to out here in the Western world, it's psychedelic, it has to be this extravagant,
Mm,
wowing, epiphanic thing. But when in your ways, it's just a part of life. But then for you all to not even know about this entire international movement showed me that their work to building relationships with the Native American nations, especially those of the Peyote ways, stops and starts somewhere. So who are these
mm,
people who are on the stages getting the money? Who are these people running, the Peyote conservation project? Because obviously it's not the actual, to me, the people, the stewards, some people call it the work, Marx would say the working class or the proletariat of the Navajo or the Peyote Nation aren't involved, like unless you're extravagant and wearing your regalia to these conferences. Which no judgment, but I have a little bit of judgment about it because it's not a ceremony to me, and you don't wear ceremonial clothes outside of ceremony. But that's besides the point. So then my question is like ideally in an ideal world, right? If like we lived in a decolonized world where people aren't trying to colonize the medicine, how would, your people steward that medicine and share that in right ways with people?
well, to me, lo and behold, the ceremony, the ceremonial practices does begin with the foundation. The foundation is what people don't talk about. And the crescent moon, they call that the road of life. That's the foundation that we're supposed to walk on. So,
Mm,
so that's where the foundation is actually the four cardinal directions, and that's the least thing that people talk about. What does what are the what does what does the four cardinal foundations represent? Do we just go into a ceremony, to a hogan or to a teepee, and we just sit there and twiddle our thumb? No, it doesn't work like that. When a person steps right into the ceremony, they're stepping from a business world into a world of ideas. Your division changes right there from the business world into what Socrates called the unexamined life is not worth living. So the perspective changes into what does it mean to be human?
mm,
What does it mean to be a human? I'll just tell you the $1 million answer. It means to live by ideas.
mm,
Because outside the ceremonial circus, outside the ceremonial circle, we live by food. But when you go into ceremony, we live by ideas. We share information, what it means to be more human. And that's a whole lifetime experience going around from birth, from puberty, all the way down to the end of life. But there's a medium. The medium is to the going, if you go around clockwise, the second cardinal direction is the medium.
mm,
It's the common denominator, like in a fraction. The sum divided by the common denominator is equals the sum. The sum is out like in the West. So the West is that's where Kierkegaard comes in. He said there's three levels of existence: the aesthetics, ethical, and religious. That's kind of what he focused on. So from childhood to puberty, it's like to be like 25 years old, you live like in an aesthetic world. You don't have to
mhm,
worry about food, shelter, and clothing. It's all there for you.
mm,
Then somewhere there's a transformation that has to occur from the aesthetic, from childhood into adulthood to become a young adult. You put away the toys, you put away everything, and then you start understanding the struggle actually begins there. And the ethical struggle begins there into understanding who you are. So you have to begin to understand yourself and your life in order to exist in a religious environment. You see? So that's where everybody jumps the gun to say, just start praying, pray, pray, pray. That to me, it doesn't work like that. There has
Mm.
to be an ethical prerequisite. You can't take a certain course in the university without taking the prerequisites.
Mm.
So there's got to be a sure thing. So the idea of the West Pillar is to live a religious life. The North Pillar is the idea of a sure thing. What is a sure thing? That's where the struggle, the human struggle, we're born into this struggle to be who we are. Like you and me are Americans. What does it mean to be an American? Where is it written? Where is the language written to be an American? Where did that come from? You see, if you,
Iroquois Nation.
yeah, where does it come from? Americanism. Where does it really come from? See, as
Hmm.
opposed to we are the red, white, and blue. When people put their hands over their chests, when the national anthem or, the Pledge of Allegiance, what does that really mean? Where is it coming from? You see, Nan to be a Navajo again. What does it mean to be a Diné? What's the idea of being a Diné? You gotta. Somebody can tell you, but you also have to learn yourself. So the foundation, the foundational aspect is what's missing right now. And the idea of living a religious life is supposed to be unity. That's why
Mm.
they call it United States. United, to be a united people. How come there's divisions? How come
Mm.
so and I disagree with each other? That's where I think uh, Indian people will never agree on anything. We
Mm.
will never agree, even though there's a language barrier. How come we don't agree on this? You
Mm.
see? So to me, it's along those lines because sometimes we lie. We lie. If I say I'm an American, that we uphold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, right there. If all humans are supposed to be created equal, and I'm practicing bigotry, being biased, being prejudiced, I'm a liar. So the only time people think of unity is when they're out in war, when it's a life and death situation.
Mm.
You see what I mean? I
Hmm.
think that's where people finally understand what unity means, because we're supposed to be a sovereign nation. So what does that mean? See, that's what we don't the K through 20, they hardly talk about it, the classical education. It's all about career. The career is what makes people a cyclops. They,
Mm.
that's why there's a lot of murders, a lot of violence, domestic violence, a lot of disagreements because people are walking around like a monster cyclops. Only one arm is like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Actually, what about the left arm? The who you are. So if somebody came up to you and says, "Who are you?" Explain yourself. A lot of our kids in high school, they don't know how to explain themselves. So what happens then if we people walk around like cyclops? They live in a state of spiritual disparity. Outside the Hogan, outside the teepee, they call it disparity.
Mm.
But when you talk about it from within inside the ceremony, if they don't understand the pillars, they call that spiritual disparity because they end up, they're trying to look up to somebody. They're trying to look up to something. The only thing that they can look up to is the drug dealers.
Right.
The drug dealers.
But they need to look
The,
at themselves.
Yeah, see, so the idea, like Socrates said, is to live a reflective life. You know, yeah, somebody can ask you questions, so you got to struggle to find the answer, and it's got to be a sure thing. You see what I mean?
Hmm.
You got to live your life as a sure thing. That would be my answer there.
There's so much that I could go in with you, Johnny. We absolutely need to hang out for like a whole week and travel like you and kind of bring Kendra along too, because so much of what you said is what I feel. for me, particularly grandmother ayahuasca, that was the message that she sent me. She's like, who are you? What are your values? What are your principles? What is your spiritual infrastructure so that you may be unshakable and unmovable in this lifetime? And I realized that, like, in this Western civilization, that it's almost intentional that no one ever explores what it's what bell hooks calls the self-actualization, or what Paulo Freire calls the conscientio. It's like we talk about all this political theory, and we talk about socialism and communism, particularly in the left movements, but there's no actual spiritual component or embodied component where we deepen this so much beyond the intellect. And we know that through the Cartesian divide, that Western society overvalues the intellect and the mind, when really the mind is just a processing center, and the greater intelligence systems are our entire body. And I've learned that from many indigenous ways, that our entire bodies are the full intelligence. And what happens when we tap in and realize that our brains are just processors, not our main intelligence, and go from there. But that's like a whole tangent. And I think like what I'm hearing and what you're saying in your ways, and what I also have concluded, is that if there's no decolonial practice, an ethical praxis in someone's life that is to be in good relation and to be of service and to approach this life with humility and with humbleness, knowing that we're not the center of the ecosystem, but we are only a part of it. I think that like psychedelics and this medicine work would look a lot different than what we're seeing through,
Mhm.
the billionaires who are using psychedelics and are attempting to legalize and patent the spirit molecules of psilocybin. We saw them trying to do that with mescaline. Luckily, we were all able to stop it here in Colorado through the Natural Health Medicine Act. And ibogaine, they've tried that. They're doing it with MDMA and all this. They're patenting the spirit molecules, like somehow you can cage spirit. And so like that leads me to a kind of like a little bit of a turn in our conversation here, because that's like a whole other lecture series we could create, that we just shared, that you just shared with us. The wisdom is blowing my mind. But I remember when we were sitting and we had the elders come together at our Airbnb last year. I think it might have been Frank, and I think that you may know some information about this, that one of the elders were passing, and that Cody Swift and maybe some of the Bronner folks came in and were trying to take advantage of that will and that passing to take land back. And I was curious if you could also go into the Peyote Conservation Project. I remember you guys telling us the buttons used to be
Mhm.
real big and now they're reduced. The price is super big and not even being ran by local natives. So we would love for you to go into that aspect of it, because a lot of people don't know this stuff. It's very secretive and it's very behind the scenes, that even I didn't even know about this a few years ago.
So what's the question?
Can you talk about that story about one of the elders where the psychedelic movement, Bronner's and Cody Swift, took the land from the will? I think they had like four plots of land and they try to take two for
Mm.
do you know about that?
I know a little bit about it. I know the money people, the millionaires, they're buying land and they're using natives as board of directors.
Mm,
And this is all hearsay, that they are being paid a pretty penny under the table to support the psychedelic industry in the name of preservation of culture and preservation of the sacred medicine. That's how it's being talked about over here. Then again, there's no evidence.
mm,
There's no written receipts about who's getting paid $10,000, $20,000. But they are saying that some of these people have nice houses. They bought nice vehicles. So that's just hearsay. So, but those people that are being blamed, especially in Navajo country, are not coming, maybe not coming forth truthfully to say that they are paid off. They have been paid up. If I was paid, like say $50,000 to keep my mouth shut, I would probably keep my mouth shut. You know
mm,
what I mean?
mm,
I would make, it's like making an oath, something along those lines. But I do think because I don't really know. Here's where there's a lot of uncertainty. Maybe I think that the peyote is being over harvested
Mm,
in Texas, and people that have money. I know that like some of these California tribes, these non-natives, they established their own peyote religion. There are some people in Santa Fe, and there's other movement in Nebraska where they are purchasing peyote in the United States using other natives to purchase like $50,000 worth of peyote. These people have money, non-natives, so they pay natives to purchase thousands of dollars of peyote. So they take it back to these people, and then they dry it out. So they preserve it for so many years. They run ceremonies and they enjoy it. The spiritual psychedelic effects with it. So I think that's what's going on. Then
hmm
again, from Mexico. They're over harvesting too, and they're shipping the peyote to Canada, to Europe, and to Asia maybe for ceremonial purpose, but mainly a lot of it's for psychedelic industry. In other countries in South America, Mexico, Europe, Asia, they're already making pills. From what I hear, they're already making peyote cream, peyote products, mescaline products. They're making money like that. So, so I think at some point that the United States may declare the peyote button an endangered species. Once that happens, nobody can harvest that no more. It's going to be something that used to exist in ceremonial practices. Now it's hardly any peyote left. I think that's what it's going to boil down to because the way the capitalist works, they're expanding. Uh, they're starting to overuse these lands where all these sacred medicines used to grow for like cattle industry, uh, telecommunications, all that. So it's gonna sooner or later within our generation, that's gonna happen like that.
Sorry, it just makes me like knowing uh knowing how important peyote is to my native friends and the culture, and like how hard you all have worked to protect it, to keep it alive past, the original genocide of this nation, is like really, and hearing that this is the path that it's on, like, and literally, it's like so devastating to me because
Mhm.
like it's robbing it of the sacredness, and not only that, of people who have survived genocide over and over again, of the thing that helps support that trauma, and your ways for you all to see it be in a way bastardized and capitalized in this colonizer world. Like, it's just so, I don't even have words, Johnny, because
Mhm.
it's embarrassing that when you are in in the colonizer ways, that you don't know how to stop, and you overconsume to the point where you kill something and you mass extinct it. And we see this happen over and over again. And our sibling Katumi, disrupted the 2023 closing ceremony and warned everybody that when you don't respect these medicines because they have spirits, like everything has spirit, they will turn on you, and they will harm you, like how tobacco and cigarettes, coca and cocaine, and now I see like people just like microdosing peyote and ayahuasca, like it's not this spirit, this this thing that you should be taking care of in a right way and with the right
Mm.
people, with the right people, with the right lineage. And it's just like, how do you teach ethics and morals to a society that doesn't have ethics and morals from the beginning? You know, they stole the Constitution from the Iroquois Nation. They stole the way that this government is functioning from the Iroquois Nation, whitewashed it, and now we have fascist government coming in place. And so for to hear that about peyote is just so devastating. And I guess like just looking at time, we should probably wrap up. And I'm curious, I think like a couple, like two more questions. And I think if you could speak directly to the colonial psychedelia world and to those that think that they're doing good work but are hurting and harming native people that aren't, you know, the ones getting paid under the table and leading these ways, the people that are really being affected, just like the people on the war on drugs were really affected that are getting left behind in this psychedelic renaissance.
Mhm.
What would you say to those people, to those policymakers, to those working in the nonprofits at MAPS? And please don't hold back. Like my platform, when you're with me, we tell full truth here, regardless of consequence, and we need to know. So I would love to hear that message. Um, yeah, because I'm all about saving this medicine as best I can.
Mhm. Well, I think there's several ways to address it, but I'll talk about it from an American perspective. The American culture is starts out with we uphold these truths to be self-evident. That's when I look at you, you look at me, that's self-evident right there. I can see you nod your head. So the self-evident is when you go into the ceremonial circle and the self-evidence is really speaking in terms of ideas. That's where Kierkegaard comes in, Soren Kierkegaard. He says that we live in an age where ideas are cheapened. So it's who of us to understand ourselves and our life. Do we under, do we cheapen this peyote or do we not cheapen it? If we cheapen it by selling it, make it into a psychedelic drug for the marketplace, that's pure and simple. They're cheapening it in the name of money. But if they choose to save it and not cheapen it for the sake of humanity, for spiritual awareness, spiritual understanding, spiritual enlightenment, spiritual epiphany, that the living by ideas will sustain the generations to come. And I'm advocating Vision 2075 because we're in 2025 right now. 50 years down the line, that's going to be 2075. That's in our lifetime that we have to establish a containment policy. So what is this containment policy? How do we speak to a containment policy not to cheapen the peyote?
Mm.
Because if it's like a runaway train that's unstoppable, we're headed into a collision that's going to that's going to end our humanity.
Mm.
That's going to end a way of life that will no longer exist, and people are going to be turning into animals. They're going to have canine. That's already happening. People shooting
iOS.
each other, and people are going to be not united. There's going to be division. Domestic violence is already happening on the reservation.
Mm.
People don't, families don't talk to each other. They have canines. They're starting to grow canine teeth. People bite. People don't understand the difference between truth and opinion. Is truth based on opinion or is opinion based on truth? That's the golden question that I think that has to confront people that want to understand what self-evident truth is. They have to begin to roll around what Socrates meant by the unexamined life is not worth living. See,
Mm.
there's a lot, there's a whole symphony going on in literature There's a whole symphony going on, but everybody is they're all into career education. 8 to 5 job. What degree are you getting? What's your major?
Mm-hmm.
The liberal arts, the classical education, that's being it's going down. There's the philosophy the students are more and more universities are not giving out. They're not promoting philosophy education, liberal arts education, ethical literacy.
Mm-hmm.
They're taking out the common denominator of spiritual existence. I don't think a person can, from right out of puberty, they can't really say, I'm a religious person. There is a formal academic study of ethics in terms of understanding what is a sure thing.
Mm.
See, we could go on and on to actually see this because they got to have an epiphany. That's where the Statue of Liberty, the crown on the Statue of Liberty, the enlightenment is the common denominator.
Mm.
To break the shackles at her ankle, there's broken shackles, metal broken shackles, like handcuff that are at her feet. It has to be the person to declare their independence from ignorance, not to misunderstand themselves. If it's the psychedelic industry misunderstands themselves, they're shackling themselves.
Mm. Mm.
That's what's going on.
Yes.
That's what Socrates meant, that if you see it, you're going to have that epiphany. You're going to have what they call a calling of a moment when you take a different direction. See, that's what's going to bring about unity. If we lose that, United States, the red, white, and blue is no longer going to be in existence.
Mm.
You see what I mean? So the
Mm-hmm.
liberal arts training, the culture to me is just materialistic right now because it's all one way. It's all one way communication. But there has to be room for discussion in
Mm.
order for facilitation to happen. That's not happening at the UNM Gallup branch here
Mm.
at Fort Lewis, Northern Arizona University, Arizona State University, Stanford. President Trump, President Biden, President Obama, all these the Native American presidents, chairmen they don't talk about classical education because they never had a commitment. They don't, if they had a commitment, they would be talking like me. It's a relentless because the self-improvement industry is a $3 billion industry. You see what I
Oh
mean?
man. Yes, that's a
Once
whole
you
other can of worms.
Yeah, once you start seeing the way, if you start seeing the way, that's what people are yearning for, young people. They're
Mm-hmm.
lost. They live in a state of moral darkness.
Mm.
They have no mind, no thinking. They have nothing. So they're just walking around like aimlessly. They're walking around. That's a really sad state of affairs in our education. We have a mental health crisis in the United States. Where is that coming from? From lack of training and education and moral education. We have a crisis in education. The local high schools, they don't teach this.
Mm.
So they're graduating students with a half diploma. The universities are graduating students with a half a degree. They're graduating cyclops, one-eyed monster. That's what's going on. That's what President Trump is not talking about. That's what the Navajo Nation president, the council delegates, they don't know about classical education. I spoke to the speaker, Christina Curley. I asked her, do you know about classical education? She's the speaker of the Navajo Nation Council. She says, I do not know what it's about. She didn't guess. She says, I'm sorry, I don't know. If that's the blind leading the blind, that's a case where Trump should be talking about this. He should
Mm.
be saying that we have a crisis in our education. So he's using a Band-Aid, the National Guard, to housekeep Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. That's not the way. If he really
No.
saw it right, he would be saying Socrates. He would be saying Kierkegaard. He would be saying Dostoevsky. He would be saying Nietzsche. See, Nietzsche said, sleepers awake. I want you to wake up right now. I'm looking at you. Wake up right now. See, these guys were like medicine people. They
Mm.
were like medicine women. They kind of know they're like certain mental surgeons. They kind of give us the hint here and there, but we have to struggle to see it. Socrates was really tricky. All he said was the unexamined life is not worth living. Right there, you start right there. What did he really mean? It took me 2 years to snap out of it for me.
Mm.
I was in a maze. You know what a maze is, right? I got dropped into a maze. It took me 2 freaking years to get out.
The labyrinth.
Yeah, finally got out of it. And I
Mm.
said, oh man, I finally began to figure out, to finally see something. It was just getting that small glimpse. It didn't start seeing the whole thing. Just a little glimpse into Kierkegaard. That's how I saw it.
Mm.
It changed my life right there. It changed my life. The Navajo culture didn't change my life because
Mm.
nobody was there to facilitate. My mom wasn't there. It was the
Mm.
white people, the instructors that put a hot shot. You know what a hot shot is? A cattle prod.
Mm-hmm.
They put the cattle prod to me, and I felt it.
Mm.
That woke to I rediscovered my culture through higher education, through the study of ethics. In Navajo, they call that Nahata. That's the middle point between the doorway and the west, the thinking and the life. You got to have a prerequisite. You just can't jump across the stove and end up in the west. It doesn't work like that.
Mm.
So the foundation is not there. I'm sorry
Mm.
to say that. I'm very disappointed in the education system. See, that's my spill on this. And this the roadman, the word roadman is going to become outdated here.
Mm.
If we're talking about life related matters, we're actually life coaches. A roadman is actually a life coach. They have to do that. So I could say now I've been a life coach since 1990, 35 years. So I have to walk that road. So temptation resisted is a true measure of character. One more time. Temptation resisted is a true measure of character. That's the road.
Mm.
Thank you.
Every time, John, you blow my mind. I was like, how can I take your courses and how do I hire you? Um, but
Uh,
I just to conclude here, I completely agree with you. My journey actually started with critical pedagogy. I'm obsessed with it. I even created my own pedagogy based off of social activism called empowerment pedagogy. And I
yeah.
completely agree that through spiritual desolation and lack of education, particularly around philosophy, sociology, and those things that are questioning our world and how it makes up and how it influences the decisions that we make. Everything isn't is like it's not capitalism's fault. Capitalism is a consequence of the cosmology of separability, of separating, of not being one. And if we get to foundations and get to roots, that's really the core of what we see to Western ideology that is destroying our world and instead has put humanity into a posture that's not of our own and into a posture of destruction rather than creation. Because
Mhm.
based off of my self-actualization and my spiritual journey and learning from you all and from the medicines, it's we're not here to destroy things and to not be a part and to be separate of and to be hyper individualistic. We're here to be a part of and a part of the ecosystem and to be in a interdependent relationship rather than a dominating codependent power over.
Mm.
situation. And it all starts, to me, it goes beyond the economics. It goes to what I call cosmological and culture building. And I think that that's exactly what you're touching on with Kierkegaard and with classical education is like, how can anyone know who they are if you haven't even established what your ethics or morals or your values or your principles are? That's your
Yep.
spirit. And if your spirit's not there holding you accountable to this book, which I'm going to send you, Johnny, is blowing my mind. She says this culture and this cosmology here's what it says: the foundation of separability issues the promise of unrestricted autonomy. But what we see is that spiritual accountability systems, or what the West, the religion, provides, is a system of accountability. And when we're spiritually desolate, there's no accountability systems beyond ourselves. Um, and I think that's what we're talking on ultimately is the biggest message that I think we're sending here together is that we live in a spiritually desolate world, and psychedelics is a band-aid without that deep dive into self as not only as an individual, but as a collective.
Yes. Yeah, good. You're on the right track.
I'm sending you this
And
book, by the way. You're gonna love this book, Hospicing Modality
okay.
by Vanessa
Uh,
Machado de Oliveira. She's doing outstanding work.
uh, yeah, I'll send you my post office address.
All right, cool. I'm gonna stop recording now, but I'm gonna
Mm.
do a quick thank you, Johnny, again for your time and your wisdom and being a steward of these ways and of medicine and sharing it with us. It's really truly an honor to be walking on this road with you and beside you. And I'm sure everyone tonight who's watching this recording feels the same, and I hope they walk away really sitting with what you shared.